My full name is Helen Joyce Holmes, or Reid. I was born September 21st, 1939. I was born in Fort William. I lived in Geraldton for a while and then came to Schreiber. My father's parents were born in Canada, and my mother's parents were born in Finland. And my grandfather and my grandmother, Halonen, were born in Lapinlahti, Finland. And my grandfather was born in Seldenkambai, Newfoundland. And my grandmother was born in Halifax. Got married August 19th, 1961. Michael George Reid. We met at Teachers College. And like I put on there, he was across the room during break, and I was with my friend, and he started to laugh, and his face just lit up, and I said to her, I says, I think maybe you better give an invitation to this fellow and introduce me to him. So she did. I have three. There's Jeffrey Michael Reid, and he is going to be 52, and Christopher Edwin John Reid, and he will be 49, and Allison Laureen Reid, and she is going to be 45. I have three grandchildren. One is an adopted grandchildren by my son, and the other two are Jeffrey's. There's Sean, who is 30, Miles, who is 19, and Candace, who will be 16 soon. I taught school for 36 years. I started in Fort Frances, and I taught kindergarten in Fort Frances, and then I taught grade 1 in Fort Frances. And then we moved to Thunder Bay, and I taught kindergarten in Thunder Bay, and then we moved to Toronto, and we moved back to Thunder Bay, and I taught kindergarten again, and then moved down here to Schreiber, and I taught kindergarten for years, and then finally graduated to grade 1 and 2. Spent my time there. Yes, I did. I volunteered for Heritage Days and the Library Board and TOPS, which is Take Off Bound Sensibly. The big house was the big house where Jimmy Dugan lives now. We always called it the big house. It's up at the end of Galena Street. And I had so many memories in that house because that was where I spent most of my childhood. And we played outdoors. We went out first thing in the morning after breakfast, if we weren't going to school, of course. And we had the whole bush. We went back through the bush to the West Pond. We had forts. We played cowboys and Indians. We played kick the can and knock rap rap ginger. Played rap rap ginger, which wasn't a very good game to be playing, but we did. And we played tag and hide and go seek, and I mean, we just had a great time. The garden, yes. My mother had this huge garden. She grew raspberries and strawberries, and then, of course, there were all the vegetables and that, too. So our job was to go out and pick them, or my job was to go out and pick them, and then Mom would take them and she would sell them. So that was a big chore. Yeah, but it was fun, and it taught me how to garden. I loved my school years, yes. That was my favorite thing, was to go to school, because everybody was there, and you had all your friends. And we went to the old school, you know, the one that the boys were on one side, recess, and the girls were on the other side. They were never to meet. And we went down the basement all winter long, and we had all these games that we played down there, you know, Red Rover, and we actually played school, if you can believe it. We hauled out all the old desks and we'd sit there and play school. You know, it was a good time. And in high school again. I enjoyed high school. I loved learning. And I loved math. I loved literature, science. But there were a lot of fun too. I mean, I can remember some things that we shouldn't have been doing too. Riding the train. We rode the train to Thunder Bay all the time. That was, we went to visit my relatives in Thunder Bay and back again. And then we took the Bud car quite often in the summertime, and we'd go to Jackfish, the whole family, and we would pick cranberries and blueberries. And then hop on the Bud car, it would stop and pick us up and bring us back to Schreiber. And then my mom and my aunts would go down to the train and sell the blueberries. My finished grandparents in the sauna. We had a sauna downstairs in the big house. And every Saturday night, I mean, that was our bath. Every Saturday night, all my relatives came, and we had a lot of relatives in town. So we would start about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and the younger ones would go into the sauna. And I remember going in with my cousins, the girls. We'd sit there and we'd splash water on each other and we'd talk. We'd be down for about an hour. Nobody ever bothered us. When we were finished, then the next ones went in, the next ones. And it would go on right through supper. Mom made supper for everybody. And we would finally go to bed. The kids all went to bed. And the adults were going in the sauna till after midnight. It was a great time. I mean, it was just a big family gathering, and we'd have relatives from Thunder Bay even come down, and they'd spend Saturday night in the sauna. But it was very good, because I never felt clean in a bathtub for a long time after that. When we got the bathtub, it was not the same. My Grandpa Holmes and his wife had a farm in Alcona. So we would go there every summer, and Dad and all his brothers would go and help with the haying and so on. So as kids, we had a great time because we just went outdoors, and there was a lake right there. We could go swimming, we could go boating if we wanted, fishing if you wanted, and spending a lot of time in the barn with the cows and running through the cow patties and then into the lake, after you were all mucked up. And then I can remember one time being up in the hayloft, and I fell through and landed in the manger in front of one of the cows. And these huge, great big cows, and they're all been over there eating, and I'm screaming. I thought for sure I was going to be cow food. So many things went on there. That's where I ended up. My cousin was fooling around in the big truck, and I was at the back, and he jerked the truck, got it started, and I went through. So I ended up with this great big cut on my arm. A lot of things. Mom and Dad were out picking blueberries. They heard me screaming that time. We had teen town dances. We had school dances. And nobody drank. Well, I guess the boys drank, and some of the girls did, but never at these parties. And if you did come in, you'd been drinking, their peers threw them out. So it was it was controlled by your own peers, which was really good. Nobody allowed that kind of stuff. So we had really good times at the dances. And the swamp, well, that was, where the swamp was. That was the Blue Lagoon. And we were down there for cokes all the time. I remember my brother was just a little one. I used to have to babysit him all the time, so I would take him down there. And I'd just take him over to somebody's booth, and they would give him quarters, and he'd go feed the jukebox. And they'd give him pop, they'd give him chips and whatever, and when I was ready to go, I'd go collect them and go home. So I didn't mind babysitting him. That was fine. He was quite a bit younger than I was. I can remember in high school, at grade 13, we only had 4 teachers, I think it was, and they taught all the subjects, and one of them was an alcoholic, I guess, and he came in and he taught the basic subjects, and he'd be gone for maybe 2 weeks at a time. So, because I was the only girl in class, the fellows would try to skip out, but they made me go with them. And they would take me down to the pool room, where girls were not allowed, and I'd have to sit down in the corner of the pool room while they played pool, and all I could think of was my dad's going to go by for the mail, and if he ever catches me in here, I'm dead. So I was sitting in the corner. I lived with my grandparents when I first came to Schreiber. We all did. And they lived up, past Heather's, in that area. I don't know what house it is. But they lived up there first, and then they moved into the little house that used to be a kitty corner from Costa's. It's torn down now, and they use it for a parking lot. But there was a little house there, and they lived there for a while. And then they bought the big house, the one where Jimmy Dugan lives now. When they bought the big house, they lived there, and Dad built a little house where walkers live right at the moment, right across from the separate school. But at that time, there was nothing there. It was all bush. It was all bush back. I think there were 2 houses back on our road from where we had built our house. So we had that house for quite a while, and then my grandmother rather, died, the one that was in Alcona. So my grandfather and his 2 sons, who were in their teens, came to live with us. And of course we had no room in this little house, so we swapped houses with my grandparents. And that's how we ended up in the big house. So that was an interesting experience, but living with my grandparents, I don't have too many memories of it because I was very young at the time. The only one that I do remember is at the time they had the margarine, the white margarine, and they had those little tabs of color in them. So to get it to look like butter, you had to squish it around in your hands until you got the color all mixed up in with it, mix it up that way. And one day I went to have a piece of bread, and I thought I was getting white margarine and put it on. It was lard, and it was horrible, absolutely horrible. So to this day, I really don't like margarine, even though I don't have to squeeze it and mix it and whatever. I played outdoors most of the time. I just, like we grew up in the bush. Like I said, we were making forts. We were playing cowboys. We were playing hopscotch. We were playing whatever. We did all of these things, and then we would hike down to Lake Superior. We'd go out picking blueberries. We would, we played tag. I can remember playing kick the can one time, and we ran over to the station. They had a little restaurant there, and had a Coke. All these kids were looking for us. We weren't very nice, actually. We were a little bit older than some of those kids, until we just took advantage of it. And in the winter time, I spent a lot of time reading and playing with cutouts at that time. And then we were out in the snow. I mean, we weren't afraid to go out in that snow, making snow angels and sitting outside. Usually I had a popsicle, or I had an ice cream cone or something, and I would go and lay down underneath the gooseberry bushes and have my popsicle ice cream, and I'd watch the clouds, and I had all these pictures in the clouds, And I mean, I really, really enjoyed that solitary time by myself, and nobody bothered me. I could lay there for hours. I could take a book and just go and lay there, but that was my favorite spot, laying underneath the gooseberry bushes and the currant bushes, because I could sit and eat while I was reading. And we would go upstairs, the kids. We had this huge, big upstairs with old trunks and I don't know what else was there, cupboards and stuff. And then there was a bathroom, and there were 2 bedrooms, and there was a tunnel that started just behind the stairs when you came up, and it went all the way around the bathroom, or 2 bathrooms, and it came out, 2 bedrooms, and came out in the last bedroom. So that, to us, was a real creepy place, and there was a little door in the bathroom too, so when you had to go up and use the bathroom at any time and you're sitting there, this little door, it was about yay high, was there, and always thought, oh my God, if something comes through that door. We always thought there was something hiding, or somebody hiding, or I don't know what we thought was back there. But we'd go play hide and go seek, and the boys were braver, so the boys would hide in that little tunnel. And the girls, there's no way the girls would go and look for them then. That was the end of the hide and go seek. But we also practiced plays, and we would make up these plays, and then we would go down, usually at Christmas time, and downstairs we had a dining room and a living room, and there were sliding doors between them. So we would close the doors, and we'd get our little play all ready, and the adults would sit on the other side in the dining room, and then we'd open the door. And Glenn Willoughby used to start all the time with, "Ladies and gentlemen, see the spider on the wall." And then he would end it, "Ladies and gentlemen, see the spider on the wall. Ladies and gentlemen, that is all." That would be the end of our concert. And the adults, very nice, and I'll sit there and clap. We had fun with those. And we'd make up some of the silliest things, really, really magic tricks and little plays. So those were good memories. It was fun. We'd go to the farm, and then on the way back, my mother would drop me off in Thunder Bay at my aunt's, and she lived out in Riverdale in the country. So we did pretty much the same thing. My cousins and all the kids around, we would all get together, and there was a river behind, the Cam River ran behind their place, so we'd go down there swimming, and we'd want to go to this little island that was in the middle, so to get there, there was a real strong current, so we'd all hold hands and go across this current until the final one got across, and then we'd do the same thing when we were finished swimming. But we'd bike, and it was all mostly gravel roads at that time, and people would live very far apart, so we would bike or we would walk and go and visit people all down along this road. In fact, I can remember one time walking all the way from there into Fort William just to go and have a pop or something and then walk all the way back. That was the sound. We'd spend a couple of weeks there again and then finally go home. And so my whole summer was pretty much taken up with either playing at home or in Fort William or in Alcona. It's enjoyable. Oh God, things have really changed. The education has completely changed. The electric toothbrush and Slinky and microwaves and antibiotics have come out since then. Robots, subway, trains, cordless phones, computers, and all that technology. We didn't have any of that. In fact, we had the first television set in town because my Mr. Sisson, Ray Sisson, at that time had the TV contract, and so he bought a piece of land off Dad off the hill to put his tower up, or his dish, or whatever it was he had. And he traded the piece of land for a television set. And I can still I remember sitting there looking at it. I'm thinking, oh my gosh, this is just wonderful. And all it was snow. And someplace way down in the States, there was nothing from around here at the time. So look how TV's changed now. We've got these little thin television sets, and you can get any size you want. You can get television from anywhere you want. It's just unbelievable. And the answering machines and copiers and all that stuff, we didn't have that. When I first started teaching to make copies for the kids at school, we had what's called jelly pads. And so we'd have the thing, we'd had to write it out on a special paper, and then you'd put it on the jelly pad and pull papers off one at a time. You had to press it down so the imprint was on, and then pull these things off. And that was our copiers. So we didn't make too many copies for people. We'd make a lot of them. They just had to share. It was a lot of stuff. And then the society has changed a lot. You look at the divorces now. People didn't divorce the way they did. Mind you, there were a lot of unhappy families or spouses, but we didn't have that problem. The children always had two parents, male, female. Now they have, they could have two females, they could have two males, they can have just one parent, which is fine, but it's just changed so much. And I don't know what effect it has on the children at all, but it has to have some. And spare the rod, spare the child, too. Nowadays, that would be assault. If you spanked your child, you could be charged with assault. So, we had a lot of whacks across the rear end that never really hurt us, but I can see where it can get out of hand, and people can be hurt very badly. Oh, that's a problem. I see these poor kids. They're sitting across from each other, and they're texting each other. They're not looking. They're not talking. They're not doing anything. I said that with my grandson one time, and he was sitting in one chair, and his friend was in another chair. This was his first girlfriend, I guess. And they're both texting. And finally, I said to him, "Are you texting her?" And he said, "Yes." I said, "Well, are you texting because you want to say something and you don't want me to hear what it is?" I said, "Because I haven't seen you talk to each other since we sat down here. it's just unbelievable. And then they're on Facebook, and they're on all these other, what's the other ones that are on there? The only one I'm familiar with is Facebook. But they go on that, and that's all their friends, and who can get the most friends. But they don't have very many friends otherwise, which is really sad. It's like you have to communicate with people, and you have to sit down and have a laugh with people before you can become friends with them. I don't know. It's really changed. I'm afraid they're going to grow up and they're just not going to be able to talk to each other. I told them, I said, people are going to evolve and their fingers are going to be growing with little long points on them so they can hit those little letters and numbers much easier. I just read an article in Maclean's about that, about how at one time this fellow went out and he interviewed all these kids, and they were making their little tree houses, and they were playing, and they were out in the bush, and they were having so much fun, and they were coming back, with broken arms, black eyes, whatever. And he said, he interviewed them, and they just, big smiles on their face, they were just having such a great time. And he said he went back to the community, and he interviewed them later and their children, and he tried to interview their children, and a lot of the children couldn't even talk to them because they're so used to having, or they didn't want to talk to them because they're so used to having adults around all the time anyway, because their parents don't let them do anything by themselves. If they go outside to play, Mom's out there with them. If they go down to the park, Mom's there with them. And then they put these big fences around. One woman was saying, one of the women that he had interviewed the first time was saying that she bought this house so her children could play outdoors. She says, we got this big bush out there. She said, and I was thinking, oh, this is just great. She says, but I don't let my kids go into the bush. She says, I'm always so worried about them, and I'm going to put a big fence around my house so they won't go. It's just, they're just coddled too much. And I think they're going to grow up and be more frightened of everything and more unsure of themselves and not able to think for themselves. Well, you can't blame them, and I think the media is at fault in a way because we have so much media now, and all of these things about strangers and people kidnapping children and whatever, all comes out in the news as soon as it happens, where at one time it probably was happening, but we just didn't know about it. And yet, you went out and it was rare, and it still is rare, but it's just that we hear about it all, so it's unfortunate. And then those people who probably would never have done it before read about it and think, well, this is a great idea, so I'll go and try this too. So, I don't know. I'm not familiar too much with families. I know that Jeff, my grandchildren, and their family, they have their main meal together. One time, though, you had your breakfast, you had your lunch, and you had your supper together. Now it's very, very rare that you'll have those, and you go out so much to eat. You don't get the proper foods. There's a lot of fast food brought into the house. People don't cook the way they used to. I never came home from school without the smell of homemade bread and buns and cookies and food cooking all the time. My mother was an excellent cook. She never taught me, but she was an excellent cook. Unfortunately, they don't get all this now. And so we have a society of a lot of overweight children, and this all has to try and be controlled. And the pop and the sugars that they drink, oh my gosh. And it's the teenagers with their Cokes. And I shouldn't say anything because I used to go and have my Coke too, but the Cokes were a little bottle like this. Now they're a big bottle like that. It's tough. It's very, very different. I like to garden, not so much now as I did before. And I have a small vegetable garden out at the back, and I have raspberries, and I have rhubarb, strawberries if I can keep them away from the birds. And I like to paint, draw and paint, do a lot of that. I remember just that there was a lot more, well, we had a lot of snow this year. I can't say anything because I was in Florida, but We have a lot of snow, and we had a lot then, and it was, piled right up over the top of the buildings almost. Yeah, talking to my grandparents particularly, and Mom and Dad. The milkman would deliver milk, and he'd have a horse and wagon to deliver it with. There were dairies right in town. There was Eckmeyer's Dairy, and they delivered milk and sold it. Remember Costa's store, I don't think I mentioned it, but I remember Costa's store being across the street. And we were living with my grandparents just across from there, and then up just not very far from it. So on Sunday when the store was closed, if you needed anything, you just went and knocked on the back door. I remember my mother going over there one time to pick up something from Mrs. Costa, and she and Mrs. Costa were good friends. And she came home about 2 hours later singing and happy that Mrs. Costa had brought out the homemade wine. I don't know if she had the milk, but she had a good time. I didn't get too many stories from my grandparents because usually they talked about Newfoundland or Finland or whatever, so not too much about Schreiber. Oh, family picnic, yeah. She told that story about going down to Schreiber Beach with her family, and she said they were all sitting there, and this guy came running out of the bush, and his throat slit, and he's bleeding all over. She says, and he just ran right into the lake. And then she said, grandfather just said, keep an eye on him, and headed up the road to find the police or whatever. And Mom says she can remember them coming back, but she can't remember whether they rescued him or were able to get him in time or what happened to him. So I can't complete that story, I'm sorry. But I think it was that he was from, I think he was Japanese, and he had been in the war, and I figured maybe it was the effects of the war, fighting in the war or whatever, and he just decided he was going to end it all. At school, we all got food stamps, and I looked everywhere for those food stamps. I still have some someplace, and I was going to bring them and show them to you. Yeah, they had food stamps and during the war, and we would bring them home, and your parents could take the stamps and go out and get food for the family. So butter was rationed, I guess any milk, bread. So there were quite a few different foods, that were rationed, and so they had to use these food stamps to purchase them. Well, it was, but of course, it was wartime. We were young. The war didn't bother us. We knew that my uncles had gone off to the war, but we didn't know what it was, and that was just part of life.